Word life. This is basic thugonomics. This is basic thugonomics. Word life.
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to be looking at a classic from the SLDF, the Thuggee. This is an odd one because it was a classic in the SLDF. It actually survived the succession wars, well, not unscathed, but fairly well. It's been running around just about every field for quite some time. However, it doesn't have that many different variants and variations because there's a side design that replaced it more or less after the War of 3039. So it's an interesting machine that has a decent set of capabilities and that I actually really like working on and with. So let's get into it. The Thuggee is Maltex Corporation's flagship design. It's design that was set up originally as a superior small assault mech meant to challenge Starcore's Warhammer in sales and capability. Maltex's primary customer was the Terran Hegemony and the soon-to-be Star League. So those things actually sold gangbuster. At the time the Thuggee was originally set up, they wanted a military-industrial contract from the Terran Hegemony in order to secure their position as a military contractor and as a decent enough business. From their factory on Eri, Maltex built quite a lot of Thuggees, but even they could not keep up with the demand from all the member states of the SLDF and the Terran Hegemony itself, so they started selling a production license to Earthworks on top of it. Maltex was making bank on the Thuggee, so they managed to get other contracts from the SLDF, allowing them to expand their operations as well. First, they built the rather effective city fighter Wyvern in 2660, allowing them to corner another market with a very lucrative defensive contract with the SLDF. They then followed it up with the Assassin because cashing in on military contract is a thing. Let's face it, we can't all be winners, especially when you build a machine just to cash in on a trend rather than something to be effective. I'm not even sure I'd be able to do a good video review on the Assassin without actually getting in legal trouble with some people. As I keep saying, there were two types of companies in the start of the succession wars. The one that knew that the inner sphere was going to go to shit so that they prepared for it, and the ones that didn't. Maltex, unfortunately, falls in the category of the ones that didn't, and their main facility on Eri was destroyed in 2835 in what is obviously a Comstar attack. During the Second Succession War, Comstar made sure that nobody had advanced equipment and manufacturing capabilities, mostly to make sure that people became more reliant on Comstar for advanced tech and to make sure things were going sideways so that people could see the glory of Comstar. Thankfully, Earthworks still had a basic facility on Keystone where they started to produce the Thuggee in a limited and more simplified fashion. Even there, only a handful of machines were built every year, with spare parts being shipped just to everybody in the inner sphere who still ran Thuggees, which was still fairly common in the end. One of the problems was the rarer Tegart PPC that the Thuggee liked to use needed to be replaced with the far more common Donnell from the Warhammer, making the Warhammer, which the Thuggee was supposed to replace, the saving grace of the Thuggee. I'm happy to say that there's quite a few Thuggees built between 2835 and let's say 3035 that are quite functional and can easily be remastered to the traditional model with a little bit of elbow grease. By the time the original technical readout 3025 was published by Comstar, they decided not to include the Thuggee in it for two reasons. They wanted to keep secret the fact that they still had a whole bunch of them, and they said that not enough of them were still in circulation, which is a lie because those things, well, they don't pop up everywhere, but they're still extremely common, especially in their various downgraded versions. The revised TRO 3025 from Wolf that included all the Star League era designs on it and gave us a better understanding of how many of these older machines were still in service. Finally, Technical Readout 3039 became the reference for the late Succession War era battle mechs, and it included both the original Tug, the downgraded Tug, and the Hatamoto-Chi as mechs in the same family. If you're a Lyran, you might know those books as well as the Hardware Handbuch, or however the Germans say it. I'm not quite sure anybody else had a translated name of them, because Comstars just doesn't care about any language other than English. Your original Tug THG-11E came out in 2572 as a remarkable piece of hardware. It's incredibly rugged. It can run with minimal maintenance if it doesn't see combat. Of course, if you start getting into fights, the thing is going to get damaged. But once it did see combat, it has 15.5 tons of standard plates on an endo-steel chassis, coupled with a case system to protect the ammo from explosion. You get a Pitman 320, giving you a top speed of 64 kilometers per hour, which is perfectly reasonable on an 80-ton battle mech. It does have the reputation to be called a zombie mech, but compared to things like the Grasshopper, it's not as much of a zombie. It's mainly a zombie mech because it is incredibly tough, and for the fact that even though, let's say you lose an arm, you lose a leg, or something like that, it is very easy to repair and really easy to remachine the parts that are necessary. For weapons, they're mostly spread throughout the body, with each arm carrying a Tigert PPC, which matches the Warhammer's primary weapon, giving you a decent enough brawling range, even though you have that minimum range on them. Each side torso mounts a 6-tube of SRM, along with an associated ton of reload that is protected by the cases, so it makes it still very, very tough. If you lose a side torso, the other side torso and the other side of the mech is still going to be good to go. The entire thing is cooled too much, according to some, by 18 double heatsinks, which is, yes, a little bit over what you would normally need for a mech that size, unless you're operating on very hot planets, or you start getting engine hits, or anything of the sort. It is meant to be reliable. Seriously, people liked the Thug, and there weren't that many upgrades during the Star League era. We've got a few odd configuration floating around, some with null signature systems, some with command consoles. Those are just mostly one of. There's an official upgrade kit for the Royal Regiments of the Star League, which came out in 2760, right in time for the Big Bash with Emeris, replacing the standard PPCs with ER PPCs, making the Thug an even better brawler, and meaning that those extra heatsinks that you do have get used. I think this is the final form. You don't see me using air quotes there for the Thug, but I think it's probably the best setup it has for normal operations. The existing Tugs in the inventories of the Inner Sphere powers started dwindling during the early Succession War, as they saw a lot of service and were kept working even though the parts were starting to get hard to find. Over the years, a lot of them were downgraded, side-graded, regraded in order to keep up with the problems linked with the Succession Wars. Really, the fact that it survived the whole thing is actually a testament to just how tough the darn thing really is. The official Succession War downgraded Tug is the THG-10E, and it remains a very decent fighter. It entered production in 2835 after Erai's facilities were destroyed and the earthworks pick up the slack, and the biggest change is really the use of a standard chassis for the body and standard heatsinks rather than doubles. That makes it a lot less reliable. You're going to be overeating shooting 2 PPCs, but still, it works fairly well. To save on the weight, due to the change of the chassis, which is about 4 tons heavier, the SRM tubes are downgraded from 6 tubes to 4 tubes, and the case system had to be removed because, well, people didn't quite know how to make them anymore. The armor is also redesigned, made a little bit thinner, 14.5 tons, which is still quite decent on an 80-ton battle mech. While there's no official Tug 2C or even a Tug C, I have it on good authority that a lot of them were in the inventory of the clans during Operation Klondike and the early history of the clans. I have the spec for an early clan model, which used their enhanced ERPPC, which are quite good, but not quite as good as modern clan ERPPCs, but better than Inner Sphere ERPPCs. really a bit of in between the two, and modern SRM-6, which are comparable to what is used nowadays by the clans. This is basically a slight increase in firepower to the original Royal Tug, and there was apparently a ER medium laser mounted in some ball mount right under the cockpit, a little bit like on the Wolverine. I think it's a decent enough upgrade, and it probably did fairly well during Operation Klondike. The next one, which is the actual Thuggee, even though it doesn't really exist, was popularized by Sandy Reich from the Wild Geese Mercs outfit, but one of my contact in Clan Snow Raven did tell me that this is basically what they were running as far as tugs go when looking at the early clan era. It's basically a simple upgrade from the Royal one, with Clan ER PPCs in the arms and Streak SRM-6 in the torso. And with the saved weight, you add jump jets in the legs or the side torsos, or a mix of both, depending on who redesigned it. It's not produced in large amount, and I've never seen one in the inner sphere outside of Sandy Reich's one. So it's probably a thing that's hidden away in some Brian caches in clan space. The next real model of the Thug came out for the War of 39. Well, it started production a little bit earlier. In 3035, you started seeing them float around as mysterious things from the Cretan space. But the weaponry of the Thugs was available, especially as Donald PPCs rather than Thiegards. And you add plenty of chassis for Chargers that were also floating around, because the Charger is one of those odd assault mechs that stayed in production even though it wasn't very good. This did lead the people in the DCMS to build an hybrid mech, which they called the Hatamoto-Chi. This is roughly put a THG-11E with only one hand rather than two, and a Samurai's outfit. It allowed Maltex to get a nice influx of cash, allowing them to rebuild a full facility on Unity while also repairing their plan on Eri. So the Hatamoto was a very nice thing for the Tug, even though it basically replaced it for most of the inner sphere. With the Hatamoto taking center stage, there weren't that many upgrades to the Thug using new technologies. A few of them did come out over the years, mainly from ComGuard's or the Word of Blake. The first one came out in 3067, the THG-12E. It was meant to be used by Comstar, but was mainly used by the Word of Blake in the end. The PPCs are upgraded to ER versions, while a C3I computer is fit in because, well, that's what the Word of Blake liked to use. In order to make room for it, a ton of ammo, its associated case, and a double heatsink was taken out, which is still reasonable. You might overeat just a little bit by shooting everything all the time, but with a C3I computer to help, you're going to be far more accurate with it, so you might not need to shoot everything all the time as much, because things are going to blow up a lot quicker. This is a decent upgrade to the design, but it's not anything major. Heatrak and his Combine strangely also experimented with the Tug in 3067, releasing the THG-12K. Basically, they used the Comstar version and just ran with it, modifying it just a little bit because they didn't use C3I computer, but standard C3s. So they stuck a C3 slave in it, along with a Guardian ECM, which could be used to protect its own C3 network, or break up the enemy's C3 network. With the Hatamoto-Chi still in production, the necessity of this particular design was dubious at best, but I understand why it was made, especially if they add any of those things in store. We're going to have a small side note here. It is important to remember that the word thug comes from a violent and aggressive person, especially one who is a criminal. This originally comes from India, actually. The people in India had a cult called the Thuggees, who were quite criminal in attacking the British that were ruling over them. There's a lot of people nowadays, though, that will associate Thug and Thuggee with the Kaplan Confederation because it was a prevalent cult in the region. Yes, it still is nowadays. It's a little bit odd now. And they were quite prevalent even in the spheres of power, with Romano Liao being seen as an avatar of Kali for some reason. There's a few other people who try to fall in that same category. The people in House Liao kind of keep it a little bit ush-ush, you have to look at the history of the Thuggee cults. The one thing that you need to remember, the Thug itself is not associated with the Thuggees. The 3068 THG 13K Thug is a departure from the original design, and even with that K marker at the end, which generally means it should be from the Draconis Combine, this one was mostly used by Comguard and the Word of Blake. The SRM tubes are taken out of the torsos and replaced with a pair of heavy PPCs, while another one is mounted on the right arm. So you got 3 heavy PPCs, which an EAT cap of 45, which is quite a lot, and gives you a massive amount of firepower on the other end. You only still have 16 double heat sinks, however, so you are going to run fairly hot. In case something gets closer, you still have a pair of medium pulse lasers in the arm opposite the heavy PPCs, which is barely enough to really keep you protected. Not a fantastic choice in my opinion. 2 medium lasers, 2 extra heat sinks might have been a better choice. You also get a C3I computer to allow you to coordinate fire with all of this, so it is basically a awesome with a Thug body. Finally, there is a recent upgrade kit coming out again from the DCMS with the THG-13U, which came out in the 3130. So it's a really recent kind of thing, and it's meant to be a real brawler rather than a bit of an hybrid like the original Thug was. The arms are now equipped with snub-nose PPCs, so you don't have the range of a regular PPCs, but you have the same firepower and a little bit more free space. Each side torso now mount a pair of 3 tubes / rack of a multi-missile launcher with 2 tons of Case 2 protected ammo. So you can technically do longer range bombardment with LRMs and SRMs at closer range. This is not the best upgrade, at least in my opinion. Where it does shine, though, is an upgraded protection suite with 20 tons of ballistic reinforced plating, meaning is that missiles and autocannon shots are not going to be taking you down. On top of all of this, you get a supercharger on the engine and triple strength myomer to cover the whole thing in order to give you a potential top speed of 110 kilometers per hour or so, even though eating up might be a little bit difficult. There's quite a few problems with this particular design, but the base idea of snub-nose PPCs and even more armor, which is specialized, is good. I think a little bit of refinement, a little bit of upgrades could be in the cards for this one. Maybe use a laser reflective instead of ballistic reinforced, or keep the ballistic reinforced, take the triple strength myomer out, put back SRM6s. There's quite a few different things I would do with it or play around with, but I've only really seen these things in the yard about twice, so they're not very common, at least not in my neck of the wood. Really, after looking into it, the Royal Thug is really the most optimized warfighter of the lot, and a lot of those 10E from the Succession War were upgraded back to that standard over the years, because that's the one that people actually liked and actually wanted to use. Comstar model disappear after the fighting in the Jihad, leaving again the originals running around, and the odd Kuritan model that was, to be replaced by Hatamotos in the end. Maybe the Tug C will become popular again, or become popular enough if clan technology becomes available and Maltex, starts building things with it. Maybe the 13U will become popular, but, at a price tag of about 17 million per rather than the 8 mil of an 11 EB. I'm really not sure it will stick around. That's part of the problem, especially when looking at a machine that's meant to be tough and meant to get damaged. You can't afford to spend, twice the price of one that's about as good. There's upgrades you could probably do on that 11 EBs. There's things we could talk about even more if we start going into the technical stuff. But if you want more details on that, we've got various forums here at Flanagan where you can talk about it. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.